start things off with an opening prayer by Shane.
Father in heaven, we're grateful for this opportunity to come here today. Grateful to be here at BYU and grateful to this engineering. Please help us in Rivers. Please help us as we see the speaker today with gain insight to help us in our journey. We see these things in the name of Christ. Amen.
Okay, so we've got a number of announcements, so I'm just going to go over the key points for each slide, so we'll need you guys to pay attention to the details. So a couple service opportunities. Math Counts. It's this Saturday, February 3rd. If you've already committed, please go. Don't leave us hanging. The Discover STEM Fair. You need to complete the child protection training. And then the books, Science Fair Judge. That's going to be Thursday, February 8th. You need to sign up today. You can get points through running or through helping with that, and talk to Braxton. The STEM Fair next Thursday, February 8th. Today and tomorrow, there are still some events going on that can help you prepare for that. So pay attention. Dr. Bork's got an announcement.
Let me say something really quick about that. I always get every time there's a STEM fair, there's always questions. Can I go to STEM fair and count it for seminar? No, you can't. You can go to STEM fair. We'd love you to go to STEM fair. You can miss a couple of seminars and make up for it with activity points. But seminar will be going on, and you're expected to be here at seminar, even though STEM fair is going on.
Okay, you've all been warned now. But it is a good opportunity, so make time to go. The networking dinner, next Wednesday, February 7th. Previously, the deadline to sign up had been Saturday, but there are still 5 more spots open. So sign up. It'll be a good opportunity at the Hinckley Center. Just some desserts and some professionals to talk to and network with. If you would like to attend the Rocky Mountain Conference but are not participating on any of the teams, you can sign up for the surveying competition and the pre-design competition. Again, a lot of this stuff, I'll show you where it is on the blog sort of at the end, but all these announcements are on the blog. The EERI Club, they are meeting Thursdays at 6 p.m., 234 in the Clyde. Woo! And a cool project we have going on now this year is the Saratoga Springs Footbridge. So we're going to be helping build and assemble this bridge. We need lots of help. You can sign up by emailing the officer email. You can get leadership points. We're specifically looking for people with welding experience, but we're going to take any help that we can get, and any help will be more than welcome. Again, leadership, service, activity points will help you out. If you're interested in doing any global engineering outreaches, there's an info session next Tuesday, February 6th at 5 p.m. In 210, what is FP? In the Fletcher building, room 210. Okay, there's an ITE dinner professional forum next Thursday, February 8th. Kimberly Horn will be speaking. Please sign up online. Again, you can access that through the blog, I believe. And ETLC co-chair positions. Just take a minute, scan over. We need people to submit their resumes to the email address as listed, so write that down if you're interested. And if you have more questions about that, you can talk to any one of us, or now or after. Yes?
The quick question about the dinner, how much are those?
Which dinner?
The King Horn?
Free dinner. So, no reason to
That's
not
fine,
go.
real quick, so I can get a snapshot.
Yeah, okay. Take a picture of that. But again, for the ETLC, if you have any questions, you can just snag one of the officers later or send an email to the officer Gmail account. Okay, and then if any of you are interested in going to lunch after seminar with any of our speakers, take a look at the blog. We've got the schedule for the semester as far as who's speaking, what company they represent, what their topic is going to be about. And if that day works for you, if you're interested in going to lunch at the BYU Sky Room after seminar, talk to the officer that is in charge for that day, or just any of the officers, and we can probably get you signed up for that. And finally, like I said, all these things are posted on the blog. We went over a lot of stuff, lots of dates and times to keep track of. But just go to the blog and then follow the link to the Google Calendar, and you can see a whole list of everything that we've talked about. And if you've got any clubs or any other events that you'd like to have on there, let us know, and we can easily add those. All right, now we're going to introduce our speaker, Thomas Ball. Okay, so Tom is currently the manager of the Planning and Technical Support section of the Utah Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control in the Utah Department of Environmental Quality. Prior to becoming the manager of his section, he spent over 23 years as a hazardous waste compliance inspector, dealing with hazardous waste treatment, storage and disposal facilities, as well as generators of hazardous waste. For 20 of his years with the division, Tom was the lead compliance inspector overseeing the chemical weapons destruction program at the Tooele Army Depot. As part of his duties, Tom is the emergency response coordinator for the division and serves as one of the department duty officers, receiving calls anytime there's an incident within the state that threatens the environment. Tom also conducts training within the division and for the regulated community and makes outreach presentations on behalf of the division. Tom has a BS in Electronics Engineering Technology from Weber State with a minor in computer science. He was born in Kannapolis, North Carolina, home of Dale Earnhardt, for any of you NASCAR fans, and raised in Utah. Tom and his wife live in Bountiful and are the parents of 3 boys. Tom enjoys the outdoors and has spent a lot of time volunteering for the Boy Scouts of America. He enjoys skiing, hiking, and traveling and hanging out at Bear Lake. Tom's right over here. He's wearing our ref t-shirt that we have asked him to temporarily, because we're going to start a new, like, where's Waldo, where's the speaker kind of thing. So instead of having just a boring picture everywhere, we're going to hide the speaker somewhere with all the students and take a panoramic shot. So everybody smile, and then we're going to take that real quick. All right, then we're now going to have Tom come to the front and we'll turn the time over to him.
Okay, can everyone hear me? It's working at a good spot? Okay. So as my introduction said, I have a BS in electronics engineering, and you're probably wondering how I got where I am. And so just for some suspense, I will deal with that at the end of the presentation, how I got where I am. So, anybody here from Texas? Woo! Been to Tomball, Texas? Oh, you missed out. North of Houston, Tomball, Texas. Go visit sometime. It's a great little town. Not named after me, but I've been there and it's fun. Okay, so this month I worked for the Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control for 24 years. And like they said, most of that time I spent overseeing the Army's chemical weapons destruction program. I became a subject matter expert in military chemical munitions over that time period. It's a lot of fun. It was a fun project to work on. This picture is from one of their deals. That's a 1,000-gallon overpack container there, just in case something leaks. I also did inspections of companies that generate, treat, store, and dispose of hazardous waste. I'll talk more about that as we go into the presentation, and I am currently the manager of our planning and technical support section. So for this presentation, what I want to present to you guys is a brief history and overview of environmental regulations, what they are and what we do with them. Then I'll roll into the Department of Environmental Quality and give you an overview of each one of the 5 divisions in our department, so you have a kind of an understanding of what we do. And then I'll focus on my division, the Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control, what our responsibilities are, and talk about some of the projects that I've been involved in, so you can kind of see the things that we do. So, as our nation became a more and more industrialized nation, scenes like these that you're going to see in these pictures became more and more prevalent, especially in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. Air, soil, and water were being polluted and contaminated. Sites were catching fire. Places like 3 Mile Island, Love Canal, those ring a bell for any of you guys. Anybody hear of those? Those are kind of my era, when I was your age, kind of a thing. And because of all that, in 1970, President Richard Nixon created the Environmental Protection Agency. However, that wasn't the first time we began to regulate the environment and try to protect it here in the United States. The first Environmental Protection Act was the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1948. That's now called the Clean Water Act. And that was established to create a basic structure for regulating pollutant discharges into waters of the United States. It sets water quality standards for all contaminants in surface waters. The next one was the Air Pollution Control Act, 1955. This is now what we call the Clean Air Act. And that was intended to control emissions from stationary as well as mobile sources of air pollution. It sets emission limits, it requires control devices, and it mandates a reduction of emissions. And I'll talk a little bit more about those as I go on. Safe Drinking Water Act, 1974. This was intended to ensure safe drinking water for all of the public. This applies to every public drinking water source in the country. They all have to comply with this act. 1976, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, we call that RCRA. That's the one that I'm the most familiar with. That deals with solid and non-solid hazardous waste and non-hazardous waste. And then the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, 1980. This is also called Superfund, because that's too much to say. So this is the Superfund Act. Its purpose is to identify abandoned sites where hazardous materials threaten the environment. As you saw in those pictures, there were a lot of places where people were dumping hazardous materials and abandoning them. And the purpose of Superfund is to locate these sites, find out who's responsible, do a cleanup, and then try to hold those responsible also financially responsible. There's also a big pot of federal money that helps to clean up those things in case there's no responsible party. So, the state of Utah has been delegated from EPA the authority to oversee most of the environmental regulations here in the state of Utah. And we do that with the Department of Environmental Quality. So these are the major environmental statutes here in Utah, and these acts then allow for the creation of rules and regulations to protect our environment. All that is overseen by the Department of Environmental Quality and its 5 divisions. Now, to start off with, we are primarily a regulatory agency. We don't design anything, we don't build anything, but we are heavily involved in a lot of design reviews and construction oversight. And when I get into the more detailed part of the presentation, you'll see some of the projects that we've been involved with. We have 5 divisions: Division of Air Quality, Division of Water Quality, Division of Drinking Water, the Division of Environmental Response and Remediation, and the Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control. Each one of these divisions has an oversight board that's appointed by the governor and the legislature of the state, and that board is the rulemaking authority and body for each one of these divisions. And then we as staff for those boards, we're kind of the boots on the ground guys. We do the legwork on behalf of the board. So I'm going to go through a brief kind of an overview of each division, so you can kind of get an idea of what they do. So Division of Air Quality, they basically issue 2 types of permits: construction permits for new sources or for modifying existing sources, and then operating permits under Title V of the Clean Air Act. They're responsible for developing plans like the State Implementation Plan. That's the plan where you hear, when they say in the news, the state of Utah is out of compliance with this air quality standard or that air quality standard. That's all contained in the State Implementation Plan, and that's our plan that we agree with EPA that we're going to meet these standards. If we don't meet them, then EPA takes away money, or beats us up, or does whatever they're going to do, and then we try to come into compliance. Those of you who might live on the Wasatch Front know that the Wasatch Front is a bowl, and that's why we have so many inversion days on the Wasatch Front, is because pollution gets in, and if there's no wind to scrub it out, it gets trapped in there. So there are some unique things that happen in the environment that we have to deal with as well. These guys ensure that industry and residents are in compliance with our air quality standards. So you ever heard of the no-burn days? These guys enforce the no-burn days. They have people who go out and look for people, smoke coming out of chimneys and do those types of things. They also run a series of air monitoring stations around the state where they monitor air quality and work with those kinds of things. The Division of Water Quality, these guys issue a whole host of permits. Stormwater permits, pre-treatment system permits, biosolids permits, permits for animal feeding operations, permits for point source discharges, construction permits, and groundwater use permits. So they issue and administer a whole host of permits. They ensure that discharges into the waters of the state of Utah comply with the Utah and federal water quality acts. So because we're a delegated state, we're a delegated authority, EPA still has their hands in it. They oversee what we do. They develop and maintain water quality standards, and then they also do periodic monitoring and assess surface and groundwater throughout the state. So they go out every summer, they send crews out to take samples, and then they write a report, and if there are water bodies that are not meeting the standards, then they develop plans to bring those water bodies back into compliance with the standards. Division of Drinking Water, they're responsible for implementing and enforcing the rules that ensure safe and reliable drinking water. So their job is to make it so that here in Utah we don't have a Flint, Michigan. Their job is to make sure that drinking water is safe for everyone. Right now they've got a project ongoing where they're collecting water samples from all the elementary schools in the state of Utah because it was determined several months ago that there are some elementary schools that have some older plumbing systems and there are higher levels of lead than we might like in our elementary school drinking water. So they're running a program to hopefully get some of that addressed. They oversee the certification of water system operators. So if you run a drinking water system, you have to be a certified operator to do that. They oversee that program. They also deal with emergency response. So if there's a boil order issued, it could come from a local health department or it could come from the Division of Drinking Water. They deal with cross-connection control. That's where you prevent irrigation water and culinary water from getting mixed together. When I used to live in Farmington, up north. When I lived in Farmington, they had 2 water systems. And some of the newer subdivisions didn't want to hook onto the irrigation system, so they were allowing people to irrigate with drinking water. And so the way that they would find out who was doing it is they would turn off the irrigation water to a cul-de-sac for a week and see whose sprinklers came on. And then they would go knock on their door and say, you're watering the drinking water, you know that, and we need to make sure that you're not cross-contaminating. So, they're responsible for helping public water systems acquire funding for their projects. So they work with the federal government and other agencies to get grants. And then they also review plans for public water system construction, and then they review the designs and the constructed facilities to make sure they operate in compliance. Division of Environmental Response and Remediation. These are the guys that deal with Superfund. They deal with the sites that are on what we call the National Priorities List, which is the Superfund list. And they also deal with formerly used defense sites, which we have quite a few of those here in the state of Utah. They compile the data for the toxic release inventory and the Tier 2 reports for the state. So when you hear somebody talk about the TRI and Kennecott released so many tons of pollutants over the last year, these guys compile that data. They also manage our incident notification process. These guys take the spill reports and deal with emergency response. They go up to the State Emergency Operations Center if there were a major event such as a large widespread earthquake. They would be there managing our response to that. They oversee the voluntary release cleanup program. And the voluntary release cleanup program is where if somebody has had, they've got a contaminated site, they can volunteer to clean it up without us coming in and saying, hey, we're going to make you do this. They can volunteer to do it. If you volunteer to do it, usually you get some perks in there. You kind of get to do things a little bit more your way, as long as you meet the standards that are required. They also oversee the brownfields program. Brownfields are typically urban sites that might have some kind of contamination, and the city or municipality wants to use that property. They declare it a brownfield, and they work with these guys to do cleanups and make sure they can revitalize some properties. There's some interesting ones. If you're ever in Salt Lake City, over by the Gateway shopping mall, there are some apartment complexes and stuff that are built over there on what used to be a brownfield. So there's some good uses being done. These guys administer the clandestine drug lab contractor certifications. That doesn't mean we certify people who run drug labs. These are the guys who clean them up. So if you're a contractor and you want to do meth lab cleanups, you have to be certified to do that. We did have several years ago, there was a meth lab cleanup contractor in Phoenix, Arizona, who was getting money on both ends. Because they were cleaning up labs, taking the product back, and out of the back of their shop, they were running a lab. The EPA and DEA caught them, and they lost big time in the end. But they thought they had a good thing going. Then they also, these guys also work the underground storage tank program. So they work with gas stations. Anybody that has an underground storage tank that's storing petroleum products, these guys will administer that program as well. Midland Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control. This is my division. This is the one I'm the most familiar with, and we'll focus on this for the rest of my presentation. We're charged with protecting human health and environment by ensuring proper management of solid and hazardous waste, radioactive materials, and we promote recycling or reuse of materials. So we do this by regulating solid waste, and solid waste is basically anything you throw away is considered a solid waste, even if it's a liquid, it's still considered a solid waste. We regulate generation, treatment, storage, and disposal of hazardous waste, which is what I've spent my career doing. And a hazardous waste is, first has to be a solid waste, and then it's either on a list. There are listings of materials that have certain levels of toxicity or other hazards that either the state of Utah or EPA has decided they should be on the list. So for example, here in Utah, we're one of 2 states in the country that have military chemical warfare agents as a list of hazardous waste, because we have so many of them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We register and inspect X-ray equipment. So our job is to make sure that when you go to the dentist or you go to the doctor and you get an X-ray, you don't get overexposed. There was a statistic that said that about, I think it's 37,000 cancer deaths per year are caused by overexposure to X-rays. Now, overexposure to X-rays is not going to happen immediately. It's a long-term thing, but that's what our job is, to try and prevent that from happening. We regulate and oversee corrective action. Corrective action is where a facility wants to clean up, they've had releases or spills, and they want to clean it up. We work with them to make sure those things get cleaned up and then the property can be used and is not an environmental hazard. We license and regulate the 3 uranium mills here in the state of Utah. We also license people who transport and use radioactive materials. I don't know if BYU has one, but the University of Utah has a nuclear reactor. We license and regulate that nuclear reactor. And then we regulate disposal of low-level radioactive waste. So that is the Energy Solutions landfill that's way out in Tooele County. We work regulating that. So I'm going to the rest of my presentation, I'm going to kind of work through section by section and talk about a little bit more detail about each one of these sections does. So solid waste section. They issue permits to solid waste facilities for the treatment and disposal of waste in a manner that protects groundwater and soil. These include municipal, commercial, and industrial landfills, solid waste incinerators, which we have at least one in the state, actually 2. Then they go out and they do inspections. So they permit these facilities, and then they go out and inspect them on a regular basis to make sure that they're operating in compliance with their permits. We have 123 solid waste landfills in the state, 32 recycling operations that this group oversees, and 2 incinerators. They also oversee the storage, disposal, and recycling of tires, which has become an interesting safety hazard and an issue. Abandoned tire piles are a big problem. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Every time you buy a tire here in Utah, you pay a $1 fee, and that helps to fund this tire recycling program that we have. And they also work with facilities that recycle plastic, cardboard, glass, all those kind of things. Electronics recycling. Everybody's got one of these. Electronics recycling is huge right now. It's getting harder to do because there's kind of a glut in the market, because every time Apple comes out with a new iPhone, everyone's got to get a new iPhone. What do they do with the old iPhones? Hopefully they send them to be recycled, but it's kind of causing a glut in the electronics recycling market. When we talk about landfills, though, this is what most people think of, because this is what you can see. And this is what when I started working for the division, I was telling my grandma, hey, I got a new job, I'm working for the Division of Waste Management and Radiation Control. And her response was, all those years of education and now you're a garbage man. So some people don't quite understand it, although my wife has a cousin who is a garbage man, and he can buy and sell probably all of us in this room. There's a lot of money in garbage, so it's not such a bad thing. However, modern landfills are engineered structures. They're not just a hole in the ground, although there are some small rural landfills that are just a hole in the ground. But most major landfills nowadays are engineered structures. So you've got man-made materials in here, high-density polyethylene, drainage materials, soils, clays, compacted materials, all making up the base layer of a landfill. You fill it up, and then you have an engineered structure on the top, and then hopefully you could do something, a vegetative cover, or has anyone flown through Kennedy Airport in New York? Kennedy Airport's built on a landfill. So there are beneficial uses to the property after a landfill fills up the space. So they are engineered structures. Things like this is the basin of a landfill being constructed. Looks like they're finishing up the HDPE part of that one. Here's another one where they finished the HDPE part and now they're spreading on the soil cover that goes on top of that. I'm going to talk more about a project that I was involved with, and I'll give you a little bit more detail on how these things are constructed when I get to that point. But they're engineered structures. We work with, they have to be permitted, so they submit designs to us. We review those designs and make sure they meet the regulatory requirements and the best engineering practices. And then we have people on site while construction is going on to make sure they're constructing it in accordance with the design and operating it properly later on. Waste tires. Waste tires present a unique problem when it comes to handling and disposal. First of all, tires don't compact. So landfills don't like tires because they take up too much space. So it's been made illegal in most places in the country to dispose of a lot of tires in a landfill. We prefer that you recycle them. So in 1990 here in Utah, we passed the Waste Tire Recycling Act. And in fiscal year 2016, almost 24,000 tons of tires were recycled here in Utah. And there's all kinds of uses for recycled tires. So this is one of the most innovative ones I've seen recently. This is a material called Flexipave. Flexipave is a porous pavement. It's made with shredded tires and a urethane bonding agent. They basically pour this out, kind of like concrete. They even spread it with trowels like you would concrete, and then compact it. It makes a solid surface that you can drive vehicles on, but it also provides some amount of cushion. So it's good for playgrounds as well as for walkways like this, parking lots. On the company's website, they have a great video showing they flexipaved the edge of a parking lot on a slope, and there's water running down the slope. It gets to the flexipave and the water stops because it's porous. So water will flow right through it and into the ground. So you can use it for things like this where you've got a planting, you can put Flexipave around that, you're not going to have a weed problem, and the tree's still going to get water naturally. So that's one of the innovative ones that I've seen the last 2 years are used for recycled tires. And if anybody has a question at any point in time, I know I'm kind of getting into this here, raise your hand or throw something at me or yell, "Hey Tom," and I'll try and answer your question as we go. Hazardous waste section. So similar to the solid waste section, they issue permits to hazardous waste facilities for the treatment, storage, and disposal of hazardous waste in a manner that protects our land and our water. Facilities that we issue permits to are like commercial hazardous waste landfills, commercial hazardous waste incinerators, military facilities. We have several of those here in the state. Currently, we have 14 permitted treatment, storage, and disposal facilities here in Utah for hazardous waste. One of the differences in regulating hazardous waste versus solid waste is that we also regulate the generation of hazardous waste. So if you're a facility that generates hazardous waste, we regulate you as a generator. We've divided those into 3 categories. The small category, very small quantity generators. These are companies that generate less than 220 pounds of hazardous waste on a monthly basis. And these could be things like small auto shops, mom and pop type operations. We have over 1,000 of these throughout the state. However, they don't have to register with us, so we don't have an accurate count of how many actually exist, very small quantity generators. The next category is the small quantity generators, and they generate between 220 and 2,200 pounds of hazardous waste in a month. They have to register. They have to notify us of their existence. These are things like Costco, Home Depot, Walmart, industrial facilities. Those are your types of things that small quantity generators of hazardous waste.
Can I ask a question?
Yes?
Are there any recycling practices that we have that don't really have as much of an impact as we do?
Yeah. Plastic shopping bags. Plastic shopping bags are the bane of the recycler's existence because all they do, so nowadays most recycling is done on a single stream basis. So stuff comes in, everybody puts all the recyclables in one can. Truck comes, dumps it, goes on a conveyor belt. There is some hand sorting that's done, but then it goes into a lot of automated machinery to separate plastics and metal and everything out. It also goes into shredders. Plastic shopping bags, all they do is get caught in the shredders, and a lot of recycling sorting facilities actually have to shut down once a day to clean the plastic shopping bags out of the shredder. So it takes, and some of the pictures and videos I've seen, they have to go with a Sawzall to cut them up because they become so twisted and entwined in the tines of the shredder. That's the easy way to get them out. So yeah, plastic shopping bags. The best way, the way to recycle them is to find a grocery store that collects them, because then that goes on its own separate recycling stream. But they don't go well in a single stream recycling process. Plastic shopping bag, basically any kind of plastic bag, should be kept out of a single stream recycling process because it just gums up the works. They need to go into their own separate recycling stream because it's good to recycle them. There are reuses for those plastic bags, and a lot of the plastic bags are already made out of milk jugs or soda bottles and that kind of stuff anyway. But they can be recycled. They just cause a problem. So that's a recycling practice that we try to encourage people to change. But most other things, the big problem also in recycling is what they call contamination of the market. So if the recycling facility is baling their recyclables and they're baling cardboard, if they get too much plastic in that bale of cardboard, they can't sell it because the cardboard recycler doesn't want to have to sort the plastic out. They just want to. So that's a big problem, and China is actually passing a lot of our recyclable materials go to China. China's actually passing regulations right now that they're cutting off. If a certain amount of dirty recyclables come in, they will cut that company off and no longer allow them to send recyclables. So there's some things like that going on that are causing problems with the recycling market. But for the most part, most of the stuff that people are commonly recycling, electronics, metal, plastic, all that stuff's good to be recycled. So we need to educate ourselves on how to recycle and the best ways to do that. Yes?
So I'm from Portland, so I'm kind of pretty liberal on recycling.
Okay.
But I feel like here in Utah, especially in Utah County, there isn't jack squat going on, especially among the students for recycling. Like they don't give us access to recycling bins or anything like that. How can that change? How can we do things to alter that?
Well, it's a lot of times it's the citizens themselves that start that. So I live in Bountiful, and in Bountiful we used to have recycling bins at the city shops, and they became very popular. And if you went down there towards the end of the month, people were piling their recyclables on the ground because the bins were full. So citizens got together and lobbied the city council and got the curbside recycling started. So, and I've heard of some colleges and universities where students have gotten together and approached the administration and got recycling programs started on campuses. So that's a good way to go, is to get enough people together and approach your administration or approach your municipal governments and encourage that kind of thing to get started. Yes?
What's your opinion on us as civil engineers becoming LEED certified?
I don't deal much with LEED certification. The building I work in is LEED certified. However, some of the LEED certification stuff I'm not impressed with, but I think it would be a good thing. I think anything you can do to add to your resume is good, and I'll talk about that towards the end when I talk about how I got where I am. Anything you can do to increase the way you're marketing it yourself, and anything you can do to increase your marketability is a good thing. Yes?
Why are lifters like 5 different types of recycling, like plastic bottles, metal tin, cardboard? I'm wondering how sensitive it is if I put a plastic pill bottle in the plastic bottle recycling. It's not like a normal plastic water bottle, but it's still a plastic bottle. Is that
No, because that'll get sorted out by them. So one of the things they use in plastics recycling is you'll see stuff will go down a conveyor, and it'll go underneath a big rotating wheel. That's a magnet. So anything metal in there gets clamped onto that, and the plastics go on their way. And then they sort out the heavier and lighter plastics. When it hits the end, there's an air blower. And the lighter plastics get blown up, and they go off to the side, and heavier plastics fall through. So they have all these different sorting mechanisms. So something like that would get sorted out in the end. The thing you don't want to do is put in food containers that haven't been washed. Because then what happens is if a truck of recyclable materials comes in and there's too much unwanted stuff, contaminated food containers and stuff, they just scoop it up and send it to a landfill anyway. It doesn't get recycled. So that's the backside that the average citizen doesn't see in the recycling world. They think they're doing a great thing by recycling, but if you contaminate the load, they'll just send it to a landfill because it's not worth their money. The profit margin in recycling materials is very thin. So. Okay, so I'll move on a little bit more. And we're talking about small quantity generators. Then large quantity generators are those that generate more than 2,200 pounds of hazardous waste in a month. And these are large industrial facilities and military facilities. We also ensure compliance with permits and regulations by doing inspections. So, for example, small quantity generators, if you're a small quantity generator, you're probably going to see one of our inspectors every 3 to 5 years. We'll come out and see how you're doing. This section also oversees the used oil program. So we have a used oil recycling program in the state where we're trying to make it easy for people to recycle used oil, especially do-it-yourselfers. That's me and you. If we change our own oil, we're called a do-it-yourselfer. So we issue permits for hazardous waste facilities. We also issue emergency permits. The majority of these permits that we issue go to bomb disposal units to deal with stuff like this. This is out in the West Desert. That's an Air Force bomb. It didn't explode when it was dropped, and somebody out there on a motorcycle found it, and so they sent an EOD team out to detonate it. This is a bunch of old dynamite in an abandoned mine shaft. So we issue emergency permits for treatment, storage, and disposal of hazardous waste if there's an imminent hazard to people or the environment. So the bomb squad stuff is really fun. I've done a lot of that. I've done trainings with the bomb squads. Those guys like to blow things up, and they know how to do it. So they're kind of fun to work with. Like I said, we do inspections of companies. We get to see the good stuff. This place is fantastic. All their containers are labeled. They're all clean. They're all closed. Everything looks fantastic there. But sometimes we see this. So this one right here, the lid's gone. Part of it's down here on the ground, but it's gone. This container here, whatever's in it is leaching out and starting to run across the ground. There's a container here that's actually bulging. Those are scary because that means there's some reaction going on inside the container. It's generating gas. Someday that gas is going to release. Might not be pretty. So we see the good and we see the bad. Hazardous waste generator inspections are fascinating. You cover the entire state of Utah. You see everything from Pepperidge Farms up in Richmond where they make the goldfish crackers to a company in Blanding, Utah that is the only company in the world that does what they do. And they're in Blanding, Utah. They recycle gallium arsenide. Gallium arsenide is a metal used in making integrated circuits. And so it comes in there to Blanding and they recycle it by separating the gallium and the arsenic. Arsenic has not a lot of value. They sell their arsenic for like 27 cents a pound or something like that. Whereas gallium, on the other hand, sells for like $300 an ounce. So it's a pretty good business, but there's only one company in the world that does it. And they're in Blanding, Utah. They get a shipment of about 8 or 9 55-gallon drums from Germany every year from a company in Germany that makes integrated circuits because they're the only ones that do it. So it's fascinating to go around. I also inspected a company in Logan, Utah. Anybody here on Verizon? You have Verizon? All your phone bills are printed in Logan. Verizon doesn't print their own. They do a data dump to a printing company in Logan, Utah that prints all their bills. They even have a post office in their building where they mail them out. So, interesting stuff, very fascinating. So this is, here in the state of Utah, we have stored 42% of the nation's stockpile of chemical weapons since the 40s. Largest chemical weapons stockpile in the country. Out in Tooele County. This is an aerial photograph of, this right here was the Tooele Chemical Weapons Destruction Facility. That the Army built out there to get rid of those chemical weapons. It was a permitted facility. I started working for the state just towards the end of the construction phase. So I oversaw the last part of construction, the full operation of the facility, and then its destruction in the end. They began operations in August of '96. They completed the project in 2012 after they had treated over 1 million chemical munitions and over 13,000 tons of chemical agent. Then they closed the facility and they demolished it. So that was the Army's commitment to the state of Utah, was that we won't leave anything behind. When we're done, we'll be gone. So the Army depot is still there, chemical weapons are gone, facility is gone. So at the end of a project like that, we required the company to make sure there was no residual contamination. So that's me right there, out with the company sampling team. We're taking samples. And one of the things I learned in this project was demolition is just as fascinating as construction. I watch these guys in track hose do stuff that some people can't do with their hands. Some of these track hoe operators could pick up a 1-inch diameter piece of pipe, one single piece with a bucket of a track hoe and move it. They were fascinated. It was like an extension of their arm. But this building right here that we're standing next to is it was the tallest building on the site. It had 3 rows of steel columns, one on each outer side and one down the middle. The way they decided to tear it down was not with the wrecking ball, but they came through and this column and the center column, they cut all the heads off all the bolts. So they were no longer attached to the concrete foundation. They tied cables up here in the top, tied them to track hose down here. Then there's also cables tied to these supports here, pulled by that tractor. Cables tied over here. This is a closer one. You can see the cable running across here. You can see the cable going out. This picture I took, they started to pull it down and it didn't come because as soon as the tractor on this end pulled, you see that slack cable, cable snapped. So then they had to go in and redo everything, and eventually And then 3 guys in Trackos picked it apart. Because then once it was on its side, a Traco could reach all the way up to the top of it, and they just went in and took it apart one piece at a time. A lot of the metals were recycled. They were using a lot of the vessels and piping in that structure were created with an alloy called Hastelloy. Hastelloy has a high recycle value, and so they were very careful in separating out those metals and recycling a lot of them. Which is one of the things we encourage, rather than take all that material and just throw it away, why not recycle what you can? So we try to encourage things like that to happen. Our corrective action section. So these guys oversee remediation efforts by companies. So this is not the type of these are not the Superfund sites. These are companies that are actively in business. They've got some environmental contamination. They want to take care of it. So these guys work with them. They develop site management plans and try to make it so property can be used by companies without contamination. They're currently working on 44 active sites here in the state right now. But they're dealing with stuff like this. So this is a place called Engelhard out in Salt Lake City. These were wastewater ponds. The wastewater was a low pH wastewater, so it contaminated the soil, made it very acidic. So they went in, drained all the water away, any remaining water that was there, took samples and to find out how deep the contamination was, excavated down to that depth, took the soil, mixed it with lime, let it dry, then sampled it. Once the pH had reached a neutral pH, they spread it back out, and it was reusable, ready to go, just as an industrial site once again. So more of the corrective action. This is an ongoing project and probably will be ongoing for many years. This is another aerial photograph of the Army's chemical weapons facility. In the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the way the military disposed of chemical munitions and standard munitions was either burying in a pit or burning and then burying in a pit. So all these dark lines over here, the ones over here, those are all trenches and pits. We've even found pits where entire rail cars were rolled into the pits, lit on fire. All that's left is the metal carriage. But they did some interesting things there. Here's a picture of how it worked. Throw a bunch of debris in, pile a bunch of munitions on top of it, dump in a bunch of diesel fuel, throw in a flare, and walk away till the smoke stops. And then they would come back and just push the dirt over the top of it. It's sometimes effective, sometimes not very effective. Then the other problem is that they did bury chemical munitions. And so these hills out here have buried chemical munitions in them. The biggest problem there is that it's unsafe to send humans in there to do it, but it's too dangerous to send in a heavy equipment because something might blow up as you drive over the top of it and impact that explosive. So sites like this will probably have to be capped until somebody generates some kind of new technology that can go in there and remediate them. Luckily, a lot of the stuff that we've found as we've been doing this project is like this. It's completely burned out, just metal casings. They're able to send those off to be recycled. However, they do occasionally find something that didn't burn. And in this project, they found 235 mustard rounds, mustard gas munitions, that they couldn't verify that the mustard gas was gone. So lucky for us, the Army has had problems with this in the past, and they created this thing. This is a mobile blast chamber. It's mounted on a trailer. The Army has 3 of them. They take them all over the country. Anytime they find unexploded chemical munitions, and they bring them to this, they set this up. So we permitted the operation of this unit here. They had to bring in design drawings and operational plans, and we permitted it, set it up, they operated it. This is basically how it works. These are 4.2-inch mustard mortar rounds. In the center here is a shape charge. That tray gets slid into the chamber. The door is sealed shut, and from a remote control, when they push a button, the shape charge detonates, opening up all the munitions. It destroys any explosives that are there. Yes?
He had a question for you.
Question?
I was just curious, did this come out of DOD's budget or something else?
Yes, DOD. Yeah, this is all DOD projects. At the Army Depot, yes. Yeah, so they have to pitch to Congress every year a new budget. You know, they have to go out, get a bid, take that, promote that project, and see if they can get it done. Okay. So I'll just jump to the end here and wrap this up. Do this the easy way. This last slide I want to show you, this is just, these are all the degrees and certifications and stuff that the professionals in my office have. As I said, that's me, I'm the electronics engineer. The way I got here was, I was working for a family-owned company doing fire alarm and security technician work, and there was no upward mobility, nowhere to go. And my father-in-law said, yeah, just go out and start interviewing until something comes along. So I just started interviewing for jobs, random jobs. And most of them I knew I wasn't going to get, but it was just an interview experience. When I interviewed with the division, at that time it was the Division of Solid and Hazardous Waste, when I interviewed with them, they were looking for somebody with control systems experience because they had an Army Chemical Weapons Incinerator, which was all robotics and remote control. And I had control systems experience. And our division's philosophy is we can hire somebody with a professional degree that meets what we need, and we can train them in the environmental regulations and other things. So like I say, I'm a subject matter expert in chemical munitions, military chemical munitions, because that's what I was trained in. I am also a certified hazardous materials manager. I do a lot of emergency response stuff. I'm trained to the operations level in hazardous materials emergency response. So my thought to you there is, just because you have a degree in one area, it doesn't mean you should stop learning. You should always continue to learn. Information, if you want it. We do occasionally have internships. You can go on our website and there's a form you can fill out and sign up for interest in internships. Thank you.